going deeper into the subject of what the future holds for all of us, I'm delighted to have with us Cat Tully, who's joining me from the UK. She is the co-founder and director of the School of International Futures, which is an independent consultancy that builds capacity for business leaders, policymakers, governments, and international organizations to use and gain value from strategic foresight. Cat Tully also studied at the University of Cambridge, doing her BSc in Social and Political Sciences, and has a Master's in Public Affairs from Princeton University. Cat Tully, what I find really amazing, and I love this line from your LinkedIn, so I'm going to steal it and quote it as it is. She believes in the importance of the private, not-for-profit, and public sectors working together to develop effective solutions to complex global challenges. So just in that sentence, I sense your commitment to collaboration, commitment to understanding different factions, and acknowledging that, look, the private sector does exist and needs to exist, not-for-profit and public sector. So there's an acknowledgement of society and the structures that society has formed, but a desire to ensure that they collaborate, and eventually a mission to solve complex global challenges. So with that, Catarina, welcome to this conversation, and thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much. I am a great admirer of the work that you do, and it's a real privilege to be able to chat to you and your community of young students.
Terrific. So as we start this conversation, when this topic came around, and I started around thinking, like, is this something that's interesting, and why would we have this conversation about the future? And as I'm doing more and more interviews, I'm realizing the study of the future holds varying significance for different people. So I'd love to learn from your lens and from your vantage point, why do you think it's important to keep your eyes on the future?
Well, things are changing so much at the moment, right? If we look back 15 years, goodness, what a different world that was. That was before the global financial crisis. The price of oil was really low. Facebook had just started, and wow, things have really changed since then. And if we look just another 15 years in the future, we'll be almost at 2040, and the kind of jobs that we do will be very different. The kind of work that we have, the way that we create productivity in our societies will be very different. The way that we potentially live in our flats and go to work and eat and go to school may be different. It may not be as well. There's some brilliant little designs from the 1900s. If people know, when the Eiffel Tower was built from the great Paris exhibition of 1900, they also commissioned a series of images of what the future would look like in the year 2000. And one of them was about a picture of a school. And it actually looks in some way quite similar to the schools that we have today. So some things change a lot over 5 years, and some things don't change a lot, even over 100 years. And so the art and the science of looking in a structured way at alternative possible futures, understanding that a lot of things happen anyway, whether it's technology, demography, climate change, but actually some things are within our gift to influence. That is the kind of work that we do. And in a time of real turbulence and change with emerging technology and the connectedness of the world, it's really important to have this skill to kind of think about different alternative scenarios about the future of work, of jobs, of how productivity is created in society, of entrepreneurship. And as we're educating the next generation of citizens, to start thinking about what the skills they may need and what the jobs they're going to do in the future.
Terrific. I think I couldn't have summed it up better. That's exactly the mission that we have here as we're writing this book, to be able to figure out some sort of predictive trends in terms of what the future holds, and how do you start sort of skilling towards that future. So thank you for that opening statement. I want to touch upon something you said. You said, things which may be in our sphere of influence in terms of being able to, control them, or at least, interact with them. And you touched upon some of these factors. You touched upon technology, you touched upon sustainability, etc. So let's go a little bit deeper into now that we've established what to keep our eyes on the future. What are some of the factors that are influencing this future that we're all eager to experiment with?
So obviously, emerging technology is really important. And that is not just, everybody's talking about AI at the moment. That's obviously going to fundamentally transform both the workplace, but also education, and also how we engage with each other in families, in society. But also there are other forms of emerging technology coming along, from synthetic biology, that will mean that there's going to be some very profound changes in the rest of society too. So from emerging technology all the way through to demography really matters. Things like how our global population is actually aging now. I think we've just recently hit peak working population. However, within that global trend, there are lots and lots of differences. Some countries are very rapidly aging, like China and Europe. Others are becoming much more diverse in terms of the ethnic mix of different countries, and some continents, like the African one, and partly also in the Middle East, are dramatically growing and have a very large youth population. So demography is extremely important. So is geopolitics and international connectedness. And I think one of the key, most overlooked drivers of change is the fact that each generation has very different values. And if you start looking at Generation Alpha, for example, and slightly Gen Z, you see all sorts of different values around the importance of authenticity and trust. Very different experiences are coming out, and how that influences the future, how they all intersect, is a really interesting question. Of course, we're increasingly aware of how our environment and our planetary boundaries are going to influence the context in which we're working in, how it's going to potentially, whether there's going to be severe climatic incidences, or it's going to have impact on rural livelihoods and infrastructure, the kind of, depending on whether we're able to address some of the worst effects of climate change that are ahead. And also, as emerging technology means we call upon different kinds of primary resources from around the world. So the interconnectedness of the world, and from a geopolitical and geoeconomic perspective, is also going to be really important. And one of the big uncertainties that we're facing at the moment is where we go from here, as we tend to be coming, at the moment in these 2020s, we're coming to a kind of touch point of old systems after 1945 really coming to the end of their life cycle, and we're exploring what new life cycles could look like.
Okay, so it sounds like it's the factors are seemingly distinct at the surface, but very, very, very much interconnected.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I like the point you touched upon in terms of the value system. It's actually a unique perspective, because, and there is definitely a generational shift with every generation,
Absolutely.
feeding into consumer behavior, consumer patterns, and
And
what sort
workers,
of
right? Workers, like,
workers.
yeah, and like how company, look at how company workers are reacting to whether it's what's happening in Gaza, or a company's climate and environmental position, or they're really, or how they want to work as well. There's all sorts of ways in which each generation of citizens, as a consumer, as a worker, as a leader of an organization, as a voter, can really influence through things like values.
Okay, wow, that's a great thought. It gives me a different direction to think about in terms of the book, for sure. Okay, you talk through the factors, and I find the work you do, the School of International Futures, very fascinating. I'm on your website as we speak. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at the School of International Futures, and then we can talk a little bit about how some of the factors that you've spoken about play into the work that you're doing.
Well, we help people, whether it's in organizations or in governments or in companies or in community groups, think in a structured way about the future. Those things that we were talking about. What are the drivers of change? What are different scenarios ahead? And what do we do about it? So in order to help them create change today. And the change that they can make today is because they can be better prepared for the future, because they can see, well, actually, you know, as well as teaching STEM, we also need to make sure that people are also taught creative arts. It's actually the social and emotional learning, and also some of that kind of humanities, the ability to think in a kind of complex and systems way and emotional way that actually will distinguish us from the tasks that AI is going to be able to do. So it can help you prepare for the things that are coming down the pipeline towards you anyway. It can also help you go, okay, well, I actually want to have a world in which my nurses and my entrepreneurs are trained to be resilient and to actually shape the world that I want to be. So I want to invest in making batteries that are really perfect for the kind of electric cars that are great for the future, but that are actually built in a way that are recycled. So we're not constantly extracting in terms of primary commodities. So it can also help us by seeing different alternative scenarios and the future ahead actually shape and come up with new innovative ideas and products that make the future the one that we want to live in. And of course, the capability of actually coming together as a community or as a company or as a government and think about, okay, we're in this world of 2024, but 2030 or 2035 or 2040 is going to be quite different. You know, we have 5-year-olds at the moment that are going to be voters, or they're going to be consumers by 2040. How do we take their interests into account? How do we take into account the fact that the price of oil may be very different, how we may be transporting things in a very different way? So these are all ways that we can start being prepared for the future. Now, the kind of work that we do means that, you know, we will work with a Ministry of Education or a university, and that's some work that we did in Malaysia. So Malaysia has a very international education market. Lots of students from around the world, either virtually or in person, go to Malaysia to study. And so they were like, well, we need to think about what the future of higher education may look out 15 years, because we need to prepare for it. And we need to, you know, as universities and as the government, think about what's going to happen if there's a splinter net, and, you know, the kind of students from China are different from the students from Australia and Europe, for example. What happens? What are the kind of curricula for the future that we might need? And in fact, there's another thing we also do as the School of International Futures, quite a lot of training and capability building. We actually think that futures literacy should be a core part of all curricula. And with a colleague organization called Teach the Future, we support them because they are very interested in bringing futures literacy and futures curriculum to secondary schools. So look them up, teachthefuture.org, and that's a really powerful set of resources where if you're a teacher or a student, or you care about how the next generation of kids are being taught and want to build their really great skills in this area, that is a set of resources that you can go to. We tend to kind of focus on the slightly older capability building market, on further education. But we do believe that the higher education space is a very important area to build foresight capabilities. So we also have a toolkit specifically actually for schools of policy education. So you've done an MBA, I did an MPA, but regardless, in both of those masters and also, you know, bachelor degrees, it's really important that foresight is taught as a skill. And we have this really interesting toolkit that if you're a school of government, if you're a national school of civil service, there's a curriculum that you can go to see how could you actually build a course to help your students do foresight. As well as being throughout, it's also a key core skill to teach through as you go in the workplace as well.
Okay, that's a vast amount of work, and I want to make sure that I go a little bit deeper into one or two things that you shared. So you brought up the government in the education system in Malaysia. So what were your recommendations? How are you seeing education, higher ed evolve over the next 10 or 15 years? And what are, let's stay on higher education, since that's obviously a very dear topic, for me personally. And if you could just share your insights on, where are you seeing higher education evolve, and what should governments and universities be doing to sort of keep up with what's coming?
So there's all sorts of things. With a lot of futures work, you can look at alternatives. You're often looking at alternative scenarios because there are uncertainties. But some of the certainties that are for sure are the kind of tastes of students and the way that they want to learn and the kind of wraparound services that they want and the style of what a university will look like and the facilities that are needed will be very much, that was one set of insights. There was also a set of insights about the kind of, not just the facilities and the space and what a university looked like, but what would the curriculum require? And those were insights of being able to provide a kind of T-shape set of curricula where you can actually have the facilities of actually going deeper into specific areas, but always providing that kind of broader set of perspectives and actually encouraging the kind of the humanities and the arts and the creativity as a required set of skills. Then there was also areas around entrepreneurship and the connections with the knowledge economy and with business. And so really focusing and building on that was a key set of insights. Plus, then there was, especially for Malaysia, there was a really interesting set of insights of where did we see the growth in the market going, in particular, because there are some weak signals that potentially, although there is, if you take a straight line trajectory of how many, the potential market could be huge, but there are at the same time signals that quite a few businesses are saying that they prefer to actually do in-house training and that they actually don't necessarily value having a bachelor's or a master's from their staff at the beginning in the hiring process. So there's also something about being able to develop modular forms of education and lifelong learning that connects to professional areas rather than and to businesses rather than just having this kind of traditional everybody does a cookie cutter at the ages of the early 20s. But then that then came to a final set of insights, which is, well, what's the role of university beyond, individually training people, citizens to be good workers or providing, insights and skills for businesses and the economy? There is actually a very powerful role of the university around social cohesion, helping people build the good life and have the skills to actually deal with the kind of environment that we're in. And so then there was a whole conversation that in a world where perhaps more businesses are leaning into providing further education and commissioning it, what is the gap in terms of well-being and having an educated, for their own sake, citizenry? What does that look like, and what's the role of universities in filling that gap? Does that make sense in terms of the arc? And this is very typical for a piece of futures work where you're kind of very much looking at the impact on the individual and then through business, some of the policy implications and social implications as well.
Okay. Again, I'm seeing a lot of the same thread of like interconnectedness in what you're saying. And I'm seeing a lot of scenario planning, it could be A, B, C, D, E, and you've sort of mapped out what might happen in either or. And added two more layers to it, saying, hey, it might not be A, B, C, it might be D and E. So let's sort of put all these options on the table so we are sort of prepared as prepared as we can be for different scenarios to come through. I want to go back to this the thing you said about is college going to become redundant, because and I run an admissions consulting firm, right, helping people go to universities. So every time I hear this argument, I sit back and say, is college really going to get redundant? And are they playing a larger role other than just equipping you with and even if it's a T-shaped education, is college going beyond that? So where do you personally stand on this? Do you think the degrees are going to get redundant, and you're really going to see a world where people don't value degrees anymore, and it's all about the skill you have, and are you able to contribute, and do you have a specific skill that a company can make use of, and you're going to be okay? Like, is college going to be out of fashion?
I don't think so. I think that what you'll end up having is pockets of, you talk of scenarios, and absolutely scenarios are key to what we do. When we're looking at the future, you look at the drivers of change, you look at how they intersect and understand the assumptions behind how they intersect, and then you use that kind of complex system to populate 3 or 4 alternative views of the future, which are none of them predictions, but they are helpful devices for you to explore what ifs. Now, the most important thing is that the reality is that you are never in one or another. The future is always a patchwork quilt of those different scenarios. And so I absolutely think that colleges and universities will be a critical way of continuing to operate in the future, because I think that we will, well, I think it's for 2 reasons, and they're both to do with values. I think that we will need always a space where learning can happen in an interconnected and interdisciplinary way. So we need those spaces for that to happen, and in a way that isn't transactional and, purpose driven in terms of like an economic purpose, but actually for its own sake. So I think that those spaces will always be valued and always occur. And I also think that if I look backwards, these institutions have actually existed in some way for a long time. So again, in Future's work, you often, Paul Sappho, who's a wonderful a man in this field, he talks about looking back twice as far as you look forward. So analogies from the past are very helpful guides, if not blueprints to what might happen. And these kind of communities of spaces of learning, I think, are always relevant and important, and will stay in some way in the future. So that the question to me that I would ask you back is, what would you like in 2040 those spaces for learning to look like, and to be and to contribute? And how would you like your students that you work with and the teachers that you work with to start moving in that direction?
Okay. I mean, what I'm getting a sense, from various conversations I'm having, is that it seems interconnected. A lot of people have spoken about this T-shaped learning, and I'm hearing a lot of, like, whether you want to be an engineer or whether you want to be this, because there is all this, India is very classically like a engineering STEM kind of, that's the mindset here. Families want their kids to become doctors, engineers. But when I interview doctors and engineers and professors from computer science, it's very interesting. They all talk about, hey, I wish I had a liberal arts education, if not as my core, then at least a supplementary education, or at least some coursework thrown in. It goes to what you were saying about looking back at the past twice over. Because just yesterday, someone talked about, like, go study something that's been there for a long time, because whatever's coming is going to change so rapidly. You're probably better off just studying something that's been there for a long time. So go study history or philosophy, right? Because these philosophers have been around for like centuries. They're probably not going anywhere. So if you want to stay relevant in the future, just do something that's been relevant for so many years that you'll hopefully be relevant going forward as well. So I like that. I think universities are, I think this interplay of curriculum, and which I think in an undergraduate, at least in the American system, they try to do that through the system of electives and having to take interdepartmental courses. I think mandating that a little bit more, making the courses on ethics, environment, sustainability compulsory modules, as opposed to just giving you like 1,000 courses and you can pick any 10. I think inducing some of that might make a bit of a difference in, even if you're a doctor, just trying to understand the environment and how that might play out with your patient, etc. So there's a lot of interplay that a lot of futurists, and obviously you elaborate on that in with great eloquence. So thank you for sharing that insight on education. Let's move from education now to another area of diversity. How are you seeing, DI pan out going forward? How big a force do you see this being? Do you think DEI is just, a coined term that people are loosely using, or do you think this is, is this real? Is this really going to impact the future of workspaces and how organizations and governments think?
So I actually think your 2 points are interestingly related, because part of the reason why I think doctors, although they have been around for many centuries as well, and mechanics and engineers are saying about the value of having that broad education, is because, knowledge, especially in such an uncertain and volatile environment that we're in, its plasticity and the ability to kind of take the information and apply it in lots of different ways in an imaginative way, that's important. Okay, so being able to deal with uncertainty, not by controlling it, but by embracing it, is a big, I think, challenge and opportunity of the moment. And cognitively, it is a skill that needs to be, I think, built and supported over time, and it's part of mental resilience, and it's part of emotional and mental well-being in a world where a lot of young people are feeling overwhelmed by both the potential negative issues ahead and also their inability to kind of shape this kind of overarchingly complicated world around them. So I think that that this is the kind of wider context within which I think diversity has to be the solution, right? Because actually things that we can't address as individuals because of the way that we see the world, we can address when we come together as a group of diverse individuals who have different capability and cognitive skills. And so our ability to empathize and connect and understand how what we're wanting to do affects different types of people, whether it's different generations, if you've got children, if you are a doctor or an engineer, bringing the skills of the philosopher, the artist,
Sure.
and the engineer together is really important. And I think if you look at the most difficult, you look at companies who have undiverse boards, they are very brittle. They may come out with an effective strategy that is effective in the short term, but in the long term, they don't, which is why René Rohrbeck has some really nice nice statistics that shows that organizations that do foresight and look at the long term are much more effective and profitable in the long term. And I think that's because it creates a space where diverse voices can actually be heard, and the value of diversity can be brought together rather than it being cause friction and a difference of understanding, because the future is a place that we can all collectively discuss and have common interest, because
Sure.
it's for our children and our children's children. So I think that I hope that diversity is not seen as a flash in the pan, and it's absolutely a critical principle for success in the kind of world that we're going to be living in the next 5 to 20 years.
I think that is really well stated, and I really think many governments around the world need to get your advice and factor this into their policy making and just their way of thinking, because I think what you're saying is very, very critical from a nation building and a state building perspective, right? Just factoring in that diversity, and as you build policy and as you make such sort of grandiose movements, just ensuring that you're listening to as many voices as you can in your decision making. Very critical. I just love what you said. Thank you for that.
Well, I'd love to, as we come to an end, just actually use that opportunity about diverse voices to talk about the next generation foresight practitioners, fellows, and community that we build, which is bringing young change agents from 95 countries around the world who are using foresight in their own communities to drive change, because they are young and yet although inexperienced in terms of life, have a lot to offer in terms of perspectives of, for example, how emerging technology may affect the workplace of the future, or what they think as workers they may need. And activating that insight and that voice is so important. And this is what this community do. And I think it's very much in the spirit of what you are doing with your community as well.
Absolutely. I want to talk about your toolkit. Can we talk a little bit about this foresight toolkit that you developed, and what are some of the tenets of the toolkit, and what was the sort of mindset when you were designing this toolkit? What is it that how did you come up with this concept, and what's in it?
I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to go because it's 1:30 and I have another meeting. So I can say one sentence if you want to kind of slice on about the toolkit.
Sure.
So Vidha, you asked me about the toolkit. We have quite a few toolkits, actually. There's an intergenerational fairness toolkit. There's a toolkit for policymakers, and there's a toolkit for educators who want to use and apply foresight in their schools of government, or school if they're educating policymakers in other ways. So I would encourage you, if you can share the link. It's for anybody really, including students. To actually apply it. You can just dip into it and apply it, or you can use it and over the, sorry, I'm not saying this properly, but you can really apply it with colleagues in your workplace. You can join a course or anything really.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to close this conversation. Is there anything you'd like to say in terms of your closing remarks to young people who are potentially anxious about the future and what it holds? Like, any advice to them in terms of how they should be thinking, and how should they be preparing for what's coming?
Well, futures literacy is a really great skill for all of us in a kind of turbulent world that can sometimes feel quite scary, but also is full of so much opportunity. I think the energy that young people have and that optimism of being able to kind of shape a better future is an amazing asset. And that, together with the field and the tool approach of strategic foresight, is a magic combination. So I really urge you to find out more, and always reach out for more information from me.
Absolutely, Catarina. I will be reaching out to you for more insights and more learning. This has been the most phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much for sharing, and you've been extremely generous. I know a lot of the work you do is probably proprietary, but thank you for being generous and sharing so many of your ideas and thoughts. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your amazing work that you do and the community that you host. It's incredibly important work. Indian leadership globally is very important. You're also almost 20% of the world's population, and so I think it's incredibly important work that you're doing. Congratulations, and I'm here to support in everything that you do.
Absolutely, the sentiment is reciprocated. Thank you so much, and have a good day. Thank you.